Alright, and we're right back to where we were in the kidnapping situation. And so surprise, surprise, my biggest f*** up was right here. That shouldn't surprise anyone in the slightest. My biggest f*** up was not going with Kagome in her whole taking a hostage plan. I know, shocker, right? I think there was only just one other instance in a moment that regarded Kagome. I did make some other choices here and there that gave me negative points for other love interests. Because there were a couple times where I actually made choices that got me points up with Ellie in my previous choices for whatever reason, even though I was trying very hard to not get points up with Ellie. But yeah, we've seen where free Ellie gets us. Okay, I have saved the game at this point. At this choice. Okay. Cool. Great. So I'm gonna go turn hints off. I don't know how many more choices we're gonna get. And then, like, I was kind of figuring, like, I choked it right, like, towards the end, right? Kind of feels that way. Also, you know, while I'm here, just turn the characters up to 69 per second, because fuck you, I can do that. Just because I feel like it. Oh yeah, let's follow Kagome's advice. We're taking a hostage. Right now, Ellie was acting on emotion. As soon as she was safe, she'd immediately start talking about everything that happened. And even if she wouldn't say anything, it'd soon become clear that Kawashima and her gang had nothing to do with it, and the investigation would continue. One way or another, Kagome would become the primary suspect. And then me. Sorry. I need to. I walked outside to catch my breath and sort out my thoughts. I needed a break. Kagome followed me. Well done, Nico-san, for not acting on emotion. Yeah, what? Acting on emotion? I would never do that. Your compliments are the last thing I need. I snapped, not wanting to agree with her on anything right now. You can still release Kobayashi. She's waiting for you. And then what? What then? You realize you put me in a situation where I have no choice. No matter what I do, I'll end up the one to blame. She smirked and shrugged. And what are you planning to do next? I already told you. I'll demand they release my father. I have something to back up that demand. Were you also the one who left the note at Ellie's house? Of course. Kagome smiled, clearly satisfied with herself. There is only one little problem. Once you demand the release of your father, the list of suspects will narrow down very quickly. That's why I won't demand that alone. Instead, I'll ask for some secret documents concerning the project. That's clever. I whistled. But only in theory. Kobayashi-jun may be a monster, but I'm sure his granddaughter's life is more important to him than anything else. I tried to remember the emotionless, wrinkled face of the old man. In my memory, it didn't have any expression. Was such a person capable of compassion? When it came to people not related to him, probably not. Whenever he was talking about Ellie, something changed about him, as if spring snow was melting, revealing the grass and plants that survived under it. Nico-san? With some effort, I returned to the real world. I don't know what to think about you right now. I'm sorry I haven't met your standards, but my father's been kidnapped. Yeah. That's the thing, you're criticizing people for kidnapping your father. You kidnapped someone yourself, alright? Don't act like you're a saint in this situation. Sure, they struck first, which definitely gives them, gives you a bit of a step up, but you're not too far up ahead of them. You have your own truth, Ellie has her own. I just don't want to be involved in this. But you are, Nico-san. Ever since. She stopped, bit her lip, and turned away as if she said more than she wanted. Ever since. What? Since you let us live at your place. Kagome clearly wanted to say something different, but I decided not to press her. Thanks, I regret it already. But Ellie was still tied up in the warehouse, definitely storing up her anger not only at Iwamura, but me too. The longer we talked, the more she accumulated. Deep inside, I began to realize that Kagome had left me no choice. Yeah. For Ellie, no matter what she claimed, I was an accomplice now. Still don't like your plan, it's too obvious. Who else wants your father free, apart from you and Maruyuki-san? Do you have any other suggestions? You know, I feel like I just found a bloody shirt and a pistol in my wardrobe, and the police are knocking at my door. Kagome laughed, and in the silence of the dark night, that laughter sounded extremely ominous. I won't be able to look her in the eye anymore. Not after everything. I felt like a traitor forced to collaborate with the enemy. Except that I did it for my own safety, rather than other people's salvation. I guess my portrait would be hung next to Zoya Kosmodemyanskaya's. Oh, God, that's a last name. You don't have to do it. Then why am I here? Mind explaining that? You followed me. And you pretended you didn't notice. You wanted me to be here, for Ellie to see me. Maybe. She finally agreed and looked away. But why? 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 Because. Her eyes flashed in the moonlight. You probably didn't want it to be just on you if you failed. Wait, did I get that right? I grinned, but Kagome looked genuinely upset. Oh, come on, don't pretend to be offended now. I'm the victim here. But the real victim sat in that damn warehouse, tied to a crate. How long are you planning to keep her there? She needs water and food. And where do you think I've been going in the evenings? This is just a guess, but you eat more than once a day, don't you? Losses are inevitable in war. But we're not at war. I flung my arms up and paced back and forth. I don't see much of a difference. And how long ago did you plan this? I didn't. If they hadn't burnt my restaurant. I remembered Kawashima and Asakura, falsely accused of kidnapping. You got back at them, too. If Kobayashi Jun does the right thing... I interrupted her. Do you really think you'll get away with it? Even if your father is released, old man Kobayashi won't tolerate a slight like this. You may be right. Kagome smiled sadly. And? But we'll think about that later. We. I grit my teeth and rubbed my forehead, surprised to find a splitting headache. I had to make a decision. We can't leave here alone for the night. Then if you want, you can stay and guard her until I return. I'll bring food for 2 people. By the way, we better feed her. Are you asking me to do that? If you want. Kagome responded emotionlessly. You know what? You started it, you finish it. I waited for her outside, shivering because of the cold autumn wind. I had neither the energy nor the will to look Ellie in the eyes. I understand. I didn't know what to do next. As if I was stuck in a superposition between 2 states. I couldn't let her go, but I also couldn't leave things as they were. I couldn't trust Kagome, but I was also too afraid to make any decisions by myself. I couldn't be with her, but my conscience wouldn't allow me to leave. The indecision was killing me, and I could feel myself drowning while standing on solid ground. Finally, Kagome walked out, carefully folded her empty bag, and smirked. You seem anxious, Nico-san. Is that all? Can we go? Of course we can. Except, did you bring your wallet? Trains don't run this late. Had other stuff on my mind. Fine, I can lend you the money for a taxi. If you'd be so kind. Sometimes I regretted that Kagome wasn't a guy, so I could punch her in the face without a twinge of regret. I got out of the car at the gate of my house and waited for Kagome to pay the driver. Where did she even get the money, given she said she hadn't managed to rescue anything from the fire? Let's sleep. I'm tired, Kagome said once taxi left. Tired, are you? I smirked. Wait, I have questions that can't wait until tomorrow. I'm listening. She sighed. How'd you manage to kidnap Ellie? She's got guards and everything. You helped me. Me? Well, indirectly, of course. Ellie had to find an abandoned warehouse where nobody would hear her. You're saying it like she went there herself. She did? Come on, that just sounds stupid. At first I was planning to kidnap her the normal way, if you can say that, like they do in movies. But for one, I had to do it in a way her guards wouldn't notice. And for two, I'm a girl and don't have the strength needed to pull that off. Knocking Kobayashi out with something heavy would be one thing, but dragging her across the city? So I had a simple thought. Who was better at tricking her guards than Kobayashi herself? I suddenly felt I didn't want to hear what Iwamoto had come up with, but the girl continued. This is why they... Because somehow Ellie told the guards that she was going to be with me or something, with Nikolai or something. And then I only had to find the right motivation for Kobayashi to sneak away from her guards and come to the warehouse I had selected. Yeah, that's why Nikolai was immediately the main suspect. Because the guards knew... Because obviously Kagome made no mention of herself and said it was... And instead, Ellie went there thinking it was Nikolai. And that motivation was me? Of course, Nico-san. Kagome gave me a big smile, and despite myself, I noted how unusually beautiful she looked in the moonlight. Now's not the time. I put a note in your name and attached a detailed map. I don't know what surprised me more, Kagome's resourcefulness or Ellie's gullibility. Nico-san, won't you even accuse me of lying? Are you lying? No. Then I won't. But you aren't surprised at all that the bait worked so well? I saw Ellie tied up. What difference does it make how you managed to do it? Kagome was hinting at Ellie's feelings for me, but this wasn't the time to talk about it. Nico-san, I'm disappointed. I was sure you'd be more surprised. I'm surprised by the fact that you're turning this into a joke. I'm quite serious when it comes to action, but it seems to me we've already figured out who the main villain here is, so now we just have to wait. And who would that be? Me, of course. Kagome proudly pushed her chest out, as if accepting a reward for finishing a school year with straight A's. She seemed so proud about it. Trust me, I'm not happy to have to go so far. If I'm to be a villain, I'm going to do it right. I mean, I gotta respect that sentiment. Like, shit, if you're gonna push me to the extreme, I'm gonna fucking go to the extreme. Considering that innocent people suffered because of you. Innocent people? She said way too loudly for our peacefully sleeping neighborhood. I took my revenge on them too. Ow. After Kobayashi got your note, I left another one in her mailbox, containing threats supposedly from them. Genius. I'm glad you appreciate. In reality, I simply didn't know how to act around her anymore. Japanese are clearly afraid of were-creatures for a reason. And to think that just recently I'd started to believe we had a lot in common. But I couldn't imagine myself kidnapping a person. Especially Ellie. Although, of course, Iwamura had a very different opinion of her. Alright, it's already late. Or early. I could barely stand on my feet and just wanted to go to bed as soon as possible. We'd been gone for just a few hours, but it felt like several days. Once in the kitchen, I stopped, looked around like I was seeing it for the first time, and turned to Kagome. Tomorrow. Yes, Nico-chan? Her face expressed polite attention, which was totally inappropriate at the moment. I need to sleep. We'll talk tomorrow. Good night, Nico-san. I didn't respond, but followed her with my eyes, then drank a glass of water and went to my room. But I couldn't fall asleep. Instead, lying awake with that nasty feeling where sleep refuses to come, and you know you'll have to lie and wait at least an hour until its return. Even despite all the exhaustion you've accumulated. So I was sharing my house with a monster. The thought didn't so much terrify me as it caused inexplicable surprise. As if I woke up one morning and suddenly realized I was no longer 18, but rather 48. Half of my life was behind me and I hadn't even noticed. How could I not see what Kagome was capable of? And what was the limit of her determination? Yeah, that's the real question. If she needed to sacrifice me for her father's freedom, what would stop her? And it wasn't only about that, but also the cruel and calculating way she executed her plan. I couldn't understand why Kagome hated Ellie so much, but the fact she did was in itself alarming. But it wasn't like Kagome was a maniac serial killer. All her actions followed a careful logic. If she'd been a complete stranger to me, I probably would have been impressed by her perseverance and effectiveness. Ostentatious moralizing and hypocrisy were alien to me. Of course, I wasn't a sociopath, but the thought that the ends justified the means crossed my mind more often than it probably had to. And by turning down her offer to play bass for Zed Fields, I'd basically abandoned the life path that would have led to Ellie. Maybe Kagome and I really were accomplices now. Maybe? Nah, we in this hard. Alright. We in this heavy. There's no maybe. That had obviously been Kagome's goal, and she'd succeeded, again. I should have felt affronted and cheated, but deep inside I only felt weariness and pity for her. If a person is mentally healthy, only other people or the circumstances of their life can push them to extreme actions. I don't want to believe that in a world where Kagome's father hadn't been kidnapped by the corporation, sooner or later she would have still easily crossed the red lines. What would I have done in her shoes? It was easy to judge from the side, lying in a warm bed, having a bank account, my own, albeit old, but decent house. But most importantly, my wish to help her free her father was only growing stronger. Because I'd also suffered because of Kobayashi Corporation. Because it was right, and because it was about her, after all. But only within reason. With these thoughts came the long-desired slumber that felt like a reward for all my hard labor. God, where do we go from here? Lord only knows. 9:24, baby, let's go. Dear God. I was always annoyed by my hesitation in deciding whether I wanted to continue sleeping or get up. I woke up too early, especially after the previous night, but immediately felt my brain switch into waking mode. If only people could consciously switch themselves off to rest. Dreams. But after lying in bed for at least an hour, unable to decide whether to get up or not, I eventually fell asleep. And in my dream, I got into a real epic novel with a complicated storyline, a detailed world and a backstory, a plethora of characters, each with a unique and complicated personality. But this entertaining spectacle was still rudely interrupted by Kagome's call. Nico-san, it's time to get up. And of course, my memory retained only pathetic shreds of the story, apart from the fact that the dream had existed at all. Nico-san? It's surprising how the same action can cause a very different reaction depending on the situation. I often grumbled at Himitsu for waking me up, but deep inside I was glad about it. Meanwhile, Kagome's wake-ups irritated me more and more with each day. Why the fuck are you even talking about school after what happened yesterday? In truth, I was mostly annoyed that I'd been deprived of a continuation to that wonderful story. Well, I can remember what it was about. So you aren't going? She put it that way, it was hard to argue with her. Give me a minute to get dressed. Maybe just a minute. Kagome smiled and walked out of the room. There was no time for breakfast, but my body wasn't awake enough to eat anyway. We walked down the familiar path to our school while I tried to process what had happened last night. People are a mix of good and bad qualities, but under difficult circumstances, most wouldn't choose to be heroes. In light of that, I'd taken what seemed to be the coward's choice, agreeing with Kagome's mediocre arguments. At this point, any excuses I could come up with wouldn't be any better than a drunk driver's after hitting a pedestrian. So what do we do next? I finally asked, feeling like I was falling asleep on my feet. With what, Nico-san? You know what I mean. With Kobayashi? Yes, with Kobayashi. She responded without slowing down. Don't even note with our demands, like it says in the first. I didn't expect the first note, but this time they're definitely going to be on high alert. Yes, which is why you'll have to be the one to leave it. Kagome looked at me and smiled. Oh, yeah, of course. I wasn't even surprised. You actually think I won't get caught? You'll come up with something. I believe in you. She shot me a sly look and stopped. We're already close to school. Aren't you afraid we'll be seen together today? I completely forgot about that. I think we have more important problems to think about. Well then. Kagome stepped over and wrapped her arm around mine. Do you mind if we walk like this? Now this is too much. I tried to release my arm, but the girl wouldn't let go. What's come over you? I guess it was Kagome's attempt to distract my attention from the fact that she bestowed upon me the honor of delivering her ransom demands. To distract me, walk with me to school, hand in hand, leave me alone with that thought, as if confirming its legitimacy. A common cause brings people together. A common crime, I said, almost whispering. Have you decided what exactly you're going to demand? What documents? We've already tried to go through one stack of papers. And they could just give us any pseudoscientific garbage. How would you know whether the tables and graphs inside have any real value? Do you think they know that Kobayashi was kidnapped by high school students? I didn't want to press her, but my question seemed reasonable. Besides, I doubt Kobayashi Jun would risk his granddaughter's life. She smirked disparagingly. I think you're the one at the greatest risk. Kidnappers theoretically should be prepared to make good on their threats. You ready to kill Ellie if her grandfather won't release her father? Oh, we're here already. yeah, I figured. Anyway, she exclaimed and released my arm, ran a couple meters ahead. Nico-san, I've got stuff to do before classes. See you later. Having said that, she hurried to school, leaving me in the yard with the other students, who didn't care at all whether we came together or not. Fuck. I walked up to our classroom and sat behind my desk. The other kids seemed to be very agitated. It's not like a person gets kidnapped every day. Ellie-sama, no less. Except that they thought it was Kawashima's and Asakura's fault, none of them knew who the mastermind really was. I did, though, and now I was her accomplice. Of course, I could reason that I was just a victim of the circumstances, but ask those who are without sin to throw the first stone at you, and you'll definitely receive with more than one rock to the forehead. Everybody exaggerates the flaws of others and stubbornly ignores their own. If we exclude outright villains, the most controversial heroes of literature are criticized most by those who unconsciously notice similarities to themselves, but desperately don't want to admit it. But if we were caught and taken to court, whether it was swift revenge from Kobayashi Corporation or protracted investigation within the Japanese judicial system, none of these arguments would help me. The best I could do at the moment was to hand myself over to the police. I would spend several years in prison, walk away a free man with a clear conscience. That was the best from society's point of view, to be more precise. I always believed that the needs of the majority eventually prevail over the struggle of a minority. In addition, over a considerable period of time, great personalities light up and fade out like flashes of light, while simple individuals merge into a homogeneous Higgs field that serves only as a substrate for the history we see. But at this moment, I was one of the bosons? Bosons? What the fuck's a boson? That formed the field, one of the many, but still unique to myself. I could acknowledge the superiority of moral norms and laws all I wanted, while not facing them personally, not presented with a difficult choice, but right now I had zero desire to act like homo socialis and confirm other people's theories with my actions. My conscience was still nagging at me, but it was foolish to think about what I would feel when everything would be over. I had never been in a situation like this before. I could only rely on the experience of characters from books, but those were often created through nothing but their authors' imaginations, who, most likely, had never lived through the extreme situations they were writing about. Besides, we hadn't murdered anyone. Yet. We were just going to hold Ellie hostage until her grandfather released Kagome's father. I kept trying to find excuses for what I was about to do. Yeah, what are you going to do, bud? I'm still concerned about that one. Classes went by casually, although I couldn't care less about teachers and their monotonous lectures. 6 hours weren't enough to come up with anything resembling a sensible plan, so I waited for Kagome at the school gate with a feeling of dread. We could be under surveillance, but that was the only thing that had come to my mind the whole day. Finally, Kagome walked out of the school, and I immediately darted off, not waiting for her. Nico-san, wait! She caught up with me and walked alongside me. Well, have you come up with a way to leave the note? Haven't you thought that we might be watched? It's one thing to sneak out of the house through the yard at night, but showing up at Kobayashi Corporation's headquarters in broad daylight is something else entirely. Then maybe we should drop in the post box at Kobayashi Estate. She gave it a thought. Even better. There's at least other people in the city at that time of the day, but we'd be completely alone there. Not we. You. Kagome corrected me calmly. Yes, and I still can't get why you've bestowed me with that honor. It's not like I have any special skills to handle it. Anyone can bring on a note. Nico-san, she said slowly, as if I had said something utterly idiotic. Then it dawned on me. Yes, anyone. Kagome gave me a questioning look. It doesn't have to be you or me. An expensive car passed by, honking at someone. Who then? You can find a homeless guy, give him some money. And if he gets caught? If he gets caught, the most he can say is that some young people paid him to pass on a note. There's a lot of young people in Tokyo. Not many like you. Kagome smiled meaningfully. Even then, I fell silent thinking about her words. That's yet another reason not to involve me. Why? Because there are indeed fewer tall Europeans in Tokyo than... I looked at Kagome from head to toe and didn't finish. Fewer? Fewer than who, Nico-san? You know what I mean. Fewer than there are short Japanese girls? Is that what you wanted to say, Nico-san? No. Calm down, I'm just joking. She smirked. Came up with a good plan, so I agree. I immediately felt relief, as if the school project I'd spent much time on was finally accepted and got a passing grade. We need to change our clothes. Our school uniform with its distinct color and style would significantly narrow down the number of suspects. On the contrary, Kagome's casual clothes were so unremarkable that even if our hobo memorized it, virtually every other girl would fit the description. You know, this idea doesn't seem to be so ingenuous to me anymore. What now? We were staying in the square in front of Kobayashi Corporation's headquarters, and for a while I even forgot about the sense of guilt I had for Ellie. The anticipation of your own plan working is always a little intoxicating. It seems that in just several moments you'll get your well-deserved reward. But the dopamine kick often doesn't correlate with the effort you put in. Fighting a homeless guy was only half the work. This plan only somewhat decreased our risk. But I no longer cared. Just ahead of me, I could see the success of the operation and Ellie's prompt release. After all, the sooner we'd let her go, the more forgivable our crime. It's too late to back out. Kagome pursed her lips and lowered her head, as if she were guilty of something. Hurry up before I change my mind. It wasn't that easy to find a homeless person in the center of the Japanese capital at the end of the 20th century, but the lack of choice in a way made my task easier. I took the envelope out of Kagome's hands and said, Wait here. What is a Japanese hobo even supposed to look like? I tried to remember when I last saw someone like that, but nothing came to mind. It's uncommon to beg for money or build a house out of cardboard in Japan. The image of a stinky, unshaved old man in torn clothes didn't quite match Tokyo's central business district. Something like that would simply be detained by the police. Then I realized that my plan had begun to fail, all along with the hope that Ellie would be released soon. My legs suddenly felt heavy, each step taking a bigger effort than the previous one. I turned around and looked for Kagome, who was patiently observing me. A failure witnessed by another person is a failure doubled. And then several children, around 12 years old by the looks of them, ran by me, shouting happily. I reacted before the thought was fully formed and could be put into words, and grabbed the girl last in line by the arm, freezing in place. You just yoinking kids now, homie? Honey-san, what are you doing? She asked in a frightened but defiant tone. Wanna make some cash? Don't tell that to a child! Hey kid, you wanna make some cash? I barely managed to force out. What do I gotta do? I saw the spark of interest in her eyes. Nothing difficult. See this letter? I waved an envelope in front of her nose. You need to bring this to that tall building. Pass it to the woman at the reception desk and ask that it's given personally to Kobayashi Jun. If it's so simple, why don't you do it yourself? Leg over hand, but the girl kept staying where she was. Because. I had to come up with a reason that sounded genuine, but nothing was coming to mind. Because I kidnapped a person, and this letter has my demands for their release. Seriously? She exclaimed. Absolutely. Damn, this is so cool. I'm in. Here, take this. That's for your work. I handed her several folded banknotes. Alrighty. The girl took them and ran off to her friends, staying nearby, who had been cautiously waiting for the outcome of our conversation. Having said something to them, she ran to the corporation's office while I turned back to Kagome. I see you changed your plans on the fly. She was, as always, unhappy about something. I improvised. After a couple of minutes, the girl walked out of the huge doors of the office building. That was a sign that our presence in the square was no longer required. I grabbed Kagome by the arm and dragged her along. Time to go.